these things are making a difference, but change is happening even if you don't see it. And that compounds, as you said, those little small things that you do over time, that is how change happens. And so I think that goes for small things and it goes for big things, And I think when we see people that we look up to and we see all these amazing things they're doing and we think, wow, they're better than me. How do they do that? Like, they must be gifted. Like they started where you're starting now, for the most part. Like, of course, some people may have had something handed to them and they got, a lucky break or whatever. But for the most part, that's brick by brick,
Yeah.
And I know that because I see people that are killing it and I know where they started. And I saw them in the beginning and it was not clear and it was not easy. And, they just kept going. And those little small steps, are so important because the truth is you don't know what's possible until you're doing it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to It's the Bearded Man podcast with your favorite, the world's favorite bearded man, Bob Bay. Each week with our guest episodes, I try to put the spotlight on an expert who can help us reach our inner potential. Our guest today is an author, keynote speaker, creator, and entrepreneur. He's the author of #1 New York Times bestselling book, What Do You Want to Do Before You Die? He was a star on MTV's show, The Buried Life. He was recently ranked 3rd best motivational speaker in the world by global gurus. He's the founder of the Bucket List Journal, a journal to help you turn your dream into reality. And for all the OG Bearded Man followers, he was episode 141 of Purpose in the Youth podcast, which came out August 7th of 2019. Back again today on the podcast. Ben Nemtin, baby. How we doing?
Bringing it back. Here we go. Round 2. It's a rematch.
A lot has changed in these last couple of years, man, and I'm very excited to do like a little bit of a recap podcast today with you and just drop into some really good stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great to be back and to see you thriving. It's amazing. So I'm happy to be back here.
It's great. Fast forward 3 years later that I now like live in a part of Venice where I live in a part of LA where I can naturally just run into you when I'm out and about. And I know I'm in the right place because of things just naturally happening like that. So that's what I love most about living specifically on the west side of LA now.
Agreed.
So the timing of this podcast couldn't have been better because I had hit you up, I think about 2 months ago to get you back on the show. Obviously, when I think of Ben Nemtin, I just think of not only the buried life and growing up nostalgically watching that as a kid, but I think of somebody who just purely represents how to achieve dreams, how to cross off bucket list items. Fast forward, I don't realize that we're going to record this podcast just 2 weeks, not even 9 days after I cross off a massive bucket list of mine, which was to run the Boston Marathon, which coincidentally I realized today was a bucket list on your guys' 100, which was number 84. So that got me even more fired up about today's conversation. But what do you think is that first step? And I think you call the impossible possible. How do people actually make these dreams, these goals become their reality? What's the first step in actually making this happen?
Well, I think we think that it's a lot more daunting than it actually is. And that fear stops a lot of us, the fear of, will I fail? The fear of what other people think. And so I think it's really important to start very small, almost as small as you can think. What's the easiest first step that you can take? Because usually with these bucket list items, these personal goals, these passions, you can call them many different things, but typically my definition of a bucket list is anything that's going to bring you joy and happiness and fulfillment. So anything that's going to allow you to be your true self or bring you closer to your true self. So instead of doing things for other people, you're doing them for you. And so that's what your list represents, is anything that brings you that sense of fulfillment and brings you back to your true self. And so the first step is first figuring out what those things are, because a lot of times subconsciously we're living for other people, or we're living the life that we think we should live because we see it portrayed around us or in the media, or we see different things celebrated as successes. And so we follow this path that we think we should be doing. We don't realize that hey, is this really what I want? So the first step is just taking some time to think about what's important to you and then writing it down. I think it's important to write your goals down because you're taking something that doesn't exist. It's a thought, it's an idea, and all of a sudden you write it down and it's real. And it seems small, but you're about 40% more likely to achieve your goal if you write it down, because you start to create accountability around these goals by making them real, because you have a reminder they exist. It's a small step of accountability, but it does help. And now, as you get buried by the day-to-day and you forget about these things, which inevitably happens, your list is your reminder, and it points you in the direction that you want to go. And so it's a very small step, but it's an important one, because one, when you write your list, it forces you to slow down and think about what's important. And most of the time we're so caught up in the day-to-day that we just don't do that. We don't take that time, and we realize too late that we've been living the life we thought we wanted, but wasn't actually the life we wanted. Yeah. And so that's called your ought self versus your ideal self. And the ideal self is what you're going for. And we can talk about this later, but that ends up being the sort of biggest basket of regrets you have at the end of your life is living the life you thought you should live, not the one that you truly wanted.
Do you think most people live the life they thought they wanted to live because it's a script? It's a formation of what society and the opinions of other people around them are telling them they should do?
I think that's part of it. I think the biggest thing is, though, that stops people is fear. And this is through research out of Cornell, and it's also in a couple other pieces of writing like Daniel Pink's new book. But it's basically fear of what other people think, or fear of failure is the biggest thing that stops us from going after that thing. What are my friends going to think if I fail? What does it mean if I fail? And so what that typically means is that we don't talk about these goals. And that means that no one can help us. We're just on our own. And so for us, we were young, dumb, and broke enough just to go for it and run it and just tell everyone that would listen or not listen what we were trying to achieve. And people stepped up in the most unexpected ways to help us. We didn't expect people to care about our list, but they really wanted us to achieve all of our list items. And they also wanted us to help other people achieve their list items. So I was always surprised how people stepped up and continue to step up, when I share my goals with people. And so you have to move through that fear. And, we know that, hanging out with the Yes Theory guys enough that this discomfort, this fear, it doesn't go away. You never conquer the fear. What you do is you become comfortable with being uncomfortable, and you become comfortable with being vulnerable, because you know that you're growing and you're pushing yourself. And at the very least, you're going to learn something. By training for the marathon and running the marathon, even if you don't hit the time that you wanted, even if you don't hit the place that you wanted, even if you didn't finish, you're still going to grow from that because of the experience of pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone. And so understanding that the fear doesn't go away, like we see people that we look up to and we think, wow, they must not feel that fear, or, they don't get nervous stepping up on stage, or, they don't feel these fears that I feel. Well, they do. They just know that those are taxes you have to pay to achieve your goals. Like you just have to pay that tax to do anything that you truly want that is great, because it's inherent in the pursuit. And so knowing that, you're like, okay, I know I'm going to feel that fear. I know I'm never going to feel ready to do this. I know I'm never going to feel inspired to do this. So I'm going to have to create my own inspiration by taking action. I'm literally going to have to force inspiration through movement, and just take these small steps towards my goal so that I can create my own inspiration. Because as you know, like once you start to move forward, then you start to feel inspired, because you start to see things happen. It doesn't just hit you. And so you start to move towards this goal, even if you don't know how you're going to achieve it, right? But you just sort of take one step in front of the other. And I think it all comes back to writing it down, because that forces you to slow down, and then you start to take that one little step, and then starting to talk about your goals. You talk about them with authenticity and to people that you think might be able to help you, and you start to break down these larger goals into smaller goals and build accountability around them. Because when you share them, you feel accountable to the people you shared them with.
Yeah.
And so if I tell you I'm going to write a book this year, and you come up to me 6 months later, and you're like, how's the book coming? I'm thinking I better start writing that book. So that's how accountability works, is you other people, this fear that stops you can actually move you forward. So this fear of what other people think, you can use that to your advantage if you share what you want, because you're like, oh shit, Bobby thinks I'm writing a book, I better start writing it.
It's putting weight on your shoulders.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting with the fear aspect of once you overcome that first hurdle of you're fearful for something, you work towards it, you accomplish it, it then becomes just a style of living where you're going to feel resistance every time you work towards a new goal, but you've been here before, this feeling, there's this trusted belief that I'm going to find a way to get to what I want. And it's that even just thinking marathon recently, like it's just a longer goal that I have to train and work towards. But I've seen this on a small scale and on a large scale for everything I've ever worked towards. And now it's just that constant, like putting myself in that discomfort, making those small micro steps every single day that's going to get me to where I want to be. And you slowly but surely, you start to see the results. As someone who's been living in, I would argue, discomfort for the last 10 years of not only Barry Life bucket list items, then turning into your own career. What's a recent fear that you've had to overcome? Your mind at this point has to be so used to living in fear, or like when you feel that resistance, you're immediately going to walk towards it, especially with the amount of speaking you do on stage. And what's something recently you've had to overcome?
I have been wanting to put out this bucket list journal for about 4 or 5 years, and I haven't done it because, in part, I think because of the fear of, I haven't put out a book on my own, a product that I really feel like embodies the things that I've been talking about for the last, 4 or 5 years. And I think that for me, there's a lot of, like, I want it to be perfect. I want it to be really, really valuable. And so there's that fear of, what are people going to think of it? What if it's not as good as I think it is? And so that's something that I think subconsciously was holding me back, because there's all these things that were really, really working, and I knew I was good at, and I could continue to do those things, but I would have to risk something to focus on this and put this out. And so that was a fear that I had to face. And I think, and I'm glad that I did, because I don't think that the problem with speaking is, I speak to, 100 times a year, but you can't come to my speaking engagements because they're for companies and their sales teams or their leadership or their, they're not public events. And so I really wanted something that took all the things that I speak about and put them into an actionable tool for people to use. And I think that one of my big focuses is reframing what a bucket list is, because I think, or at least when I used to think about a bucket list, I thought adventure travel, right? I thought skydive, travel to Europe, anything in that adventure and travel space. And I started to realize that if a bucket list is going to reflect your true self, it should reflect all aspects of your life. And adventure and travel is one of 10 categories of your life. So there's also, what are your mental health goals? What are your physical health goals? What are your relationship goals, right? You have to invest in the relationships that you want to deepen. What are your professional goals? What are your financial goals? Material, creativity, like what are your creative goals? Intellectual, what do you want to learn? How do you want to give back? So the journal basically breaks your list down. Instead of thinking like, okay, it's overwhelming to think, what are all the things I want to do in my life? Say, no, write your list one category at a time, right? And so you start to build this well-rounded list, and when you think about the top 5 regrets of the dying, they're not, they don't really have anything to do with money. In fact, one of the top 5 regrets is I wish I would have worked less. It's I wish I would have worked less. I wish I would have stayed in contact with old friends, which is why the relationship category is in the journal. I wish I would have lived for me, not what I thought others expected of me. I wish I'd had the courage to tell people how I really felt.
Wow.
And I wish I would have let myself be happier. So that's what we're trying to reverse engineer is not having those regrets at the end of our life. That's why I like to think about death as much as I can, because that puts your limited time into perspective. Like, we think we have all this time. We think we have all the time in the world that we can do that. We can write the book a little bit later. We can take the trip next year. And we forget that our time here is so short. And we see, I remember, like, I see old people walking down the street and in their 90s, and they're hunched over and shuffling along. I don't even think about it. But there's very few guarantees in life, except for the fact that you will get old and you will die. And unless Elon Musk figures out a way for us to all go to Mars and live forever in a pod and just, drive Tesla space vehicles around, like, you're going to die. And this urgency is lost because the day-to-day just sort of, we get into this pattern. And so I think it's important to like think about your 90-year-old self as much as you can. And if you're at a juncture and you're trying to decide, is this important to me? Like, is this something that I want to do, or is this something that I just want to do because I feel like I should do it or other people want? Don't ask yourself, ask your 90-year-old self. Will I regret not doing this on my deathbed? And that's a good way to check yourself to make sure that you're on your true course. Because, as we talked about this on the last podcast, The Buried Life is from a poem written 150 years ago, which talks about this human condition that we all have, which is that the day-to-day buries what we really want to do. And we have moments when we're inspired, but life gets in the way. So that was in 1852 that he talked about this. So this has been happening for hundreds of years. And we have these moments sometimes where we're shaken and we wake up, and you hear about this all the time. Like, it's trauma. My partner died. My dad died. I had a near-death experience, and everything changed. Everything I thought was important shifted. How can we have that shift without going through that traumatic experience, And I don't know the answer to it, but the only thing I can think of is being close to death as much as we can, remembering that we're not going to be here forever, and living with that in mind, so that we're basically trying to not have that regret of, I wish I would have lived for me, right?
Yeah, I'm constantly reminding myself of that question of like, is my future, if I'm on my deathbed, is this something I'm going to be happy that I pursued or that I passed on? And that ultimately will be the biggest shift for me of like, if I should do something or not. Also recently seeing 2 friends of mine, one go through brain cancer and having a massive surgery for that, and one having a life-threatening ski accident, all within the last like 3 months of seeing this happen. Like, yeah, it's not me in their bodies, but like, that's the realization to me. Like, yeah, I think I'm already somebody who very much is thinking like constantly of like, I'm going to die someday. I want to make the best of my life. I want to do great things. I want to help people. But seeing those moments, it really puts everything into perspective of like, this shit is fragile. Like, there's only so many things I can control, and I can't control my friend who was dealt the card with brain cancer, the friend that got into the ski accident. Like, these are things that like, you just wake up and you don't expect to happen that day, and they just fucking happen. But what I love about, and when I'm for sure one of those people that when I hear bucket list items, that's exactly what I would think and hear. Adventure, skydiving, traveling, like bucket list, that's what it has to be. But I love that that's the intent of this book, is like, not only is it that's 1/10 of the categories. There's these 9 other categories. And I'm curious, like how do you personally balance which items to be working on and when, right? So like if you have these 10 separate categories, which I love: travel, giving, adventure, material, financial, creative, professional, relationships, health, and mental health, it can be overwhelming of like, well, when do I work on the mental health? Well, when do I work on the professional? When do I work on the material? How do you balance when to put energy into certain buckets of your life?
I think there's no silver bullet for that. The only thing that I can say has helped, and even I'm not even that good at it, because I seem to get so busy that I do get swept up. But I do try and I think about what is going to give me energy. Like what is the thing that is going to make me feel most alive? And another way of saying that, the most like myself, the best version of myself. Because I think that there's so many things that pull you away from that. And the more and more I'm here, I feel like that's the goal, is just become more yourself, and it seems so simple, but it's so hard, because 76% of people don't do that. They live a life that they realize is not the one they wanted. So it's a huge problem. And so I try and look at like the feeling I get, or the energy that I get from certain things that allow me to feel the most like my true self. And sometimes that comes in many different forms. Sometimes that means taking a break, sometimes that means getting more sleep. That means taking time to hang out with friends. Sometimes that means changing my relationships, because some relationships that I'm in are not encouraging me to be that. Sometimes there's relationships that draw energy from you. And the biggest thing I've ever done in my life is trying to only surround myself with people that inspire me, i.e. give me energy, encourage me to be that best version of myself. So that's kind of one of the things I try and look at is like, what am I most excited about? What is really going to make me feel like getting up in the morning and doing it. And sometimes you just don't feel like anything's going to do that. Sometimes you're just struggling. And I think that it's, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the fact that more people today are struggling than ever before. More people are feeling anxious, more people are feeling depressed than probably in history. And due to the pandemic and due to just everything that's happening in the world, that this is something that we all need to understand is going to be the biggest epidemic we face moving forward, is the mental health crisis. And so, as younger-ish people, it's important that we do our part by helping break the stigma around mental health, by talking about it, by encouraging people to talk about what they're going through, to normalize the conversation so that they don't feel alone, that no one feels alone, because they're not. Because the truth is, everybody struggles. That's just human. As a human, that's what happens. You have ups and downs. And so, I'm talking about these goals, and I'm talking about pursuing, sometimes big goals and whatever that might be. But the reality is, sometimes you don't feel like you can get out of bed in the morning. And it's hard to think about going after your goals if you don't feel like you can get out of bed in the morning. And that is a hard place to be, but it also is a place that a lot of people are at. And that is, if that's where you are, that's exactly where you need to be. And so, your next step is to talk about it. Find someone that you can share with, a therapist, a loved one, and start to get these things that are running around your head out, so that someone can help make sense of them, work you through them. By talking about it, you're able to work through them. They become less scary when they're out there in the world versus just in your head. Like these worries are so daunting, but when we talk about it, sometimes they're less daunting. And so, I just wanted to mention that, because I don't want people to feel like if they're in a space where they can't even think about going after their goals because they're stuck. I've been there. I've struggled with depression many different times. What I will say is that every time I go through any type of struggle, I learn things about myself, and I'm able to build empathy for other people, and I'm able to then navigate future challenges even more. And I feel like that's all part of my full journey. So, you always hear like, oh, you'll come out the other side and you'll be better for it. And, this will be, there'll be some benefits. And in that moment, you don't feel like there's any, you're like, fuck you, like there's no benefits, but there really is when you get through it. Just know that you'll get through it, and you'll have really learned about yourself.
Yeah, it's a great point. I just got a DM 2 days ago from somebody that had just very authentically opened up and just said, I do not feel motivated when I wake up. I just don't want to get out of bed. And that becomes a really interesting conversation, because like you're saying, your dreams and these things you're working towards, it doesn't actually matter at all, because you can't even find the internal ability to just want to move, to get up, to have breakfast, to go for a walk. Is there any things that you have done daily or you've done in the past that allow you to, I'm such a big advocate for like, you got to prime yourself before you do anything else, before you step into the world. Like there's those things that you got to cross off every single day that help you feel your best self. Are there any habits or routines that allow you to operate at your highest potential, I would say?
Yeah. It sounds like I probably teed you up for this, which I didn't, but I actually think that I have I call it a mental health toolkit, and it literally habits that I've learned through going through, the gutter basically, that I now know work for me. And so these like 10 or 8 habits. We can put the link in the show notes. I think it's the one link in my Instagram bio, which is at Ben Nemtin. You can download the toolkit. These are, habits that everyone knows are good for them, right? And they're all backed by research, but it's hard to put these habits and turn them into routines. And there's different ways you can do that. And I do think that it's important to look at these habits as routines. And like, just like you wake up and brush your teeth in the morning, if you don't do that, you could start there, but like there's things that you are non-negotiable that you just kind of get into the habit of just doing, right? Like, so for instance, I just made a decision that like, I kept putting off exercising and in the day, and I'd say I do it later in the day, and I just never did it. Never found the time. The day just got away from me, and all of a sudden it's 8 o'clock, and I'm like, fuck, like I didn't go to the gym, I didn't exercise, whatever. So I just decided, like, look, I'm just gonna do it every single morning, and it doesn't need to be 60 minutes of exercise. I'm just gonna do push-ups till I can't do any more push-ups. At least, like that's it. I'm gonna roll out of bed, and I'm just gonna do and ideally I'll do push-ups, sit-ups, squats, or pull-ups, and just once until I can't do anymore. It'll take me 5-7 minutes. And so I just got into the routine of just that. It's not negotiable. Every morning, just like I wake up and then I brush my teeth, I jump in the shower, I'm going to do my exercises. If I don't have much time, then I'll take 30, 40 seconds to do, a plank or push-ups. So point is, now it's routine. And you don't think that these things are making a difference, but change is happening even if you don't see it. And that compound, as you said, those little small things that you do over time, that is how change happens. And so I think that goes for small things and it goes for big things, and I think when we see people that we look up to and we see all these amazing things they're doing and we think, wow, they're better than me. How do they do that? Like, they must be gifted. Like they started where you're starting now, for the most part. Like, of course, some people may have had something handed to them and they got, a lucky break or whatever. But for the most part, that's brick by brick, Yeah. And I know that because I see people that are killing it, and I know where they started. And I saw them in the beginning, and it was not clear, and it was not easy. And they just kept going, and those little small steps, are so important, because the truth is, you don't know what's possible until you're doing it. So you don't actually know what you're capable of. So you can't even imagine or picture yourself there until you're physically there.
Yeah.
And that is so important because we block ourselves because we can't even imagine ourselves doing it. But you can't. You only know that it's possible once you've achieved it. And so after achieving some of these big things that I never thought were possible, that started to sink in. And I just realized, wow, like I guess anything is possible. Like you just really have to put in the work, you know, and be patient, be authentic, and you know, and a number of other things. But that big idea of not really even being able to understand how you're going to do it is normal. And so anyhow, coming back to those routines, exercise is one of them. Meditation I love because it really helps me slow my mind down, especially if I can't sleep. I'll meditate at night and it'll help me get back to sleep because sleep is so important. Mm-hmm. There's going to be things that I love to do, like tennis. I fell in love with tennis over the pandemic, got into it through pop tennis, and just, you know, I'm addicted. It's so much fun. I feel like, you know, totally in the moment. So, you know, tennis is one of those things that is in my toolkit. You know, helping other people, because you get this, you get so much when you help other people. Nature, just being out in nature makes you happier. You don't have to exercise or anything. It's called forest bathing in Japan. Doctors prescribe forest bathing to patients in Japan that are anxious or depressed. Like you know, there's chemicals that are released by plants and trees that increase your sense of well-being. So the whole toolkit is on my Instagram bio. And I think that you want to try different things, see what works for you, and then make them non-negotiable, right? Like I like having athletic greens in the morning, which is a green drink. You know, I'm not sponsored by them, but maybe I should be because I talk about them. So I'll wake up, you know, I know you like making your bed. I like making the bed because that's like a keystone habit. I'll if I have more than 10 or 15 minutes, I'll stretch. You know, and what I found is, like, I have different parts, and I have ailments, right? Like I've had a herniated disc for years, and I've realized, that comes from like, it makes my hips really stiff. And so I found like 2 or 3 stretches that for my body are the most important. Like I know that these are areas that I am unusually tight in, and they will cause injuries. So I focus on stretching some of those. I do my 5 to 10 minutes of exercise. I jump in the shower. I have my athletic greens. I have my coffee, and if I'm lucky, I have time to meditate, and then jump in the day. Or I just say, "Fucking just jump in the ocean and come back, and I'm ready to go."
That'll definitely wake you up and get you going. Yeah, but what I'm hearing, and it's a philosophy that I live by, is you win the morning, you win the day, and it's not about what time you wake up. It's about, you know, like you were saying, you would find that it's 8 p.m. at night, you didn't get your fitness in, and now you're like, well, it's not going to happen. And, you know, that adds up with time. But by you carving out the time to do it in the morning, to cross off the fitness, the healthy breakfast, the meditation, maybe the journaling, like, you're priming yourself for the day ahead, so that, you know, I think it's a trial and error for everybody. You have to find the habits that make you feel your best self. Maybe you're a runner. Maybe you like tennis. Maybe you like lifting weights. Maybe it's yoga. Not everyone it's not one size fits all, but when you carve out that space in the morning, you leave yourself no excuses but to get the work done, which then obviously helps you feel better throughout the day, and then, you know, can kind of
totally
get you headed in the right direction.
Exactly. And even just mentally just makes you feel good about yourself.
Totally.
You're like, I already did it. I did the exercise. Great. Done.
Yeah.
Like, and that is, that just sort of sets your whole day up for success.
Yeah. You've mentioned, and you've mentioned this on multiple podcasts, which I completely agree. It's the key that I've done in the last 5 years, which was being mindful of who I surround myself with. That's a major decision you made. I'm hearing right now, a major decision you've made is prioritizing these habits to make you feel your best self. Mm-hmm. Are there maybe 2 to 3 other decisions you've made that you can think of that have had a ripple effect?
Definitely helping other people, because that also, you don't just help them, you help the people around them, and you help their full circle, their family, their friends. And the idea that it doesn't have to be a big give to create that ripple, and you may not see the full extent of that impact, but like a smile creates a ripple. Your energy creates a ripple. A compliment creates a ripple. Gratitude creates a ripple. Kindness. This is why they say kindness is contagious. It's because of the ripple effect. So you don't know how your compliment to the person walking down the street is going to affect the rest of their day. Not being, too hyperbolic, but like that can change, that can save someone's life. Like that literally, like if someone is having such a tough time, they're thinking about the end, and it's just a random person comes up and does something that just shakes them out of it and makes them feel like they have faith in humanity. It's just, you just don't know. So your actions have reactions, and those reactions can be positive or those reactions can be negative. And you have the power to create positive ripples, and those will come back. Those definitely will come back to you. And you don't know how, and it's not the reason you should do it, but this whole, it's all in just an energy exchange, and so you're able to create that impact. And I think it's a cool idea because it's proof that one person can create an incredible impact through this ripple effect. And you see it in real life experiences through social media, right? That's a great example of the ripple effect. Something goes viral, boom, one person just fucking
post something,
this worldwide ripple. Yeah. And so that can really happen in a smaller scale, in your day-to-day interactions. And that's a powerful thought.
It's good. Houston Kraft would be very happy with the kindness.
Totally.
The kindness king.
The kindness king.
The kindness king. Quick break from today's episode, and then we'll get right back to it. Today's episode is brought to you by the greatest hydration brand in all the land, Liquid I.V. Now, if you're listening, or you're watching, I should say, I got my favorite flavors: tangerine, we got grape, we got watermelon. This product is an absolute game changer. I've been using it for the last 4 or 5 years. I use it every single day. It helps me feel hydrated, it helps me feel good for my workouts. If I'm doing yoga, lifting weights, or going for a run, makes me feel fantastic when I'm about to jump into a podcast. When I'm going to write out the script of podcast episodes, helps me have a clear mind for thinking creatively. It really does help me in all aspects of my life, especially if I go out on the weekends and I kind of crank up the heat a little bit. This product can be an absolute game changer. I'm sure many of you have heard of Liquid I.V. I'm not sure if any of you have tried it, but I hope this is the second that makes you want to try it, me talking about it. Liquid I.V. contains 5 essential vitamins: B3, B5, B6, B12, and vitamin C, with 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks, made with premium ingredients, non-GMO, free of gluten, dairy, and soy. This product is going to help you reach your potential. How do you reach your potential? By feeling the best version of yourself. In order to feel the best version of yourself, you need to not only feed yourself the right foods, but also fuel yourself with the right liquids. Water is fantastic. Adding Liquid I.V. with it makes it even fantastic 2.0. Bet you didn't know that was possible. Head over to liquidiv.com. Use my promo code TheBeardedMan, all one word, to get you 25% off every single order. Once again, that's liquidiv.com. Use my promo code TheBeardedMan, all one word, 25% off every order. I recommend tangerine, watermelon, and grape. There's other flavors, so don't, if you want to try something else, please do so. But I think it will help you guys and gals on your day-to-day life in whatever capacity that you may need it. So head over to liquidiv.com. Use my promo code TheBeardedMan, the greatest hydration brand in the world. Now back to today's episode. Another thing when I think of when we're working towards goals, right? There's this expectation, emotional feeling that we're working towards, right? It might be we can't wait to get the car because it's going to just make us feel incredible. It could be crossing off the bucket list item of the marathon. There's this expectation of the emotional part that comes with it. Mm-hmm. How have you managed expectations for your own bucket list items or things that you're working towards, and not allowing yourself to delay gratification for these items, right? Once I get the house, I'm finally going to be happy. Once I have the 6-pack abs, I'm finally going to be happy. That's a big misconception, because then it's like climbing the mountain. You get to one peak and then you're on to the next. How have you managed like these emotions as you're working towards some of these goals that you have for yourself?
Well, I think that as you move on in life, you start to realize that that it just is not the destination. It really is the journey, and you start to see examples in your own life that reinforce that. So for me, I've had goals, I've had financial goals, I've had goals for hitting certain milestones, and I've gotten there, and I'm already thinking about the next goal, and I'm like, dude, this was like your biggest dream. And you're already thinking about the next thing.
Why do we do this, Ben? Why do we do this?
This is just human nature, because there's always someone out there that's making more, that's doing more, that you see. We look up, we don't look down. We look up the ladder, we don't look down the ladder. And so I almost think it's good to have a reverse bucket list. That's why you want to write your list like in a journal or something that you keep, or on a piece of paper, because you want to come back to it and look at all the things that you've achieved to remind yourself of all your accomplishments, and just make sure that you're not just pursuing the things that you want just for certain validation and the wrong type of reinforcement. And so I think, so that's why I say celebrate the wins. Like, you need to, if you achieve something, fucking celebrate, pop the champagne, do whatever you got to do, go out for dinner and enjoy that moment, because you forget how much work you've put into something because you're already thinking about the next thing. And if we're not celebrating those victories, what's the point? And if we're not in sort of enjoying the journey, again, what's the point? And so you hear a lot from people that have, achieved great success. They say, oh, well, I would do anything to go back to those early years. I would do anything to get back to, when it was just, I didn't know anything, and it was all, it all started to happen. And now it's just complicated and a lot of people involved, and it got bigger than I can manage, or whatever,
Yeah.
And so it's, I think it's just coming back to that idea of like, am I pursuing this thing for me, or am I pursuing it for other people, or what I think I should do? And being kind and gracious with yourself along the way, and knowing that you'll fail. And if you don't fail and you achieve it, fucking amazing. Let's take a moment to celebrate that. And instead of just like thinking about the next thing. And so, I think that's important.
Every time I jump on these podcasts, before I jump in with a guest, I kind of say to myself in my mind, like, this is the moment. This is the moment you've been working towards your entire life. Like, it doesn't have to be 2 years from now. It doesn't have to be when there's a major studio and there's 6 camera operators. Like, this is it. Like, if this is what you need to focus on. This is the peak of your career right now, bearded man. So fucking enjoy it. And even that little hypeness has made all the difference. And it doesn't matter the guests. It doesn't matter who I'm talking to. There's always going to be certain guests that stand out internally for certain purposes more than others for a magnitude of different reasons. But I understand that every single person is a brick. This is one more brick to the wall that I'm building to the growth of where I'm trying to go. And I think it's just made, I did a podcast with somebody a couple weeks on that, and I think the similar quote was, the journey is the destination. It's not, where we are in the day-to-day journey, but it doesn't have to be once you get there that you're finally happy. You can find joy in it right now. There was a quote that I pulled from our first podcast. I listened to the whole thing, and you said towards the end of the podcast, there comes a point where you have to learn to let go. And I just worry too much about stuff. And let go is, funny enough, the 2 words that I went into this year with: letting go of expectations, letting go of narratives that I create in my mind, letting go of the situations outside of my control, and so forth. Almost 3 years later from the first podcast, have you been able to incorporate that mindset and perspective into your life?
Yeah, I think that I'm someone that inherently worries about what other people think maybe more so than other people. And so that's, I think, what I was referring to is letting go. It comes back to that fear, right? That stops a lot of us, the fear of what other people think. And I think it comes back to when I was in elementary school. When I was in elementary school, I came to school one day and all my friends ran away from me at recess. So they would do this thing where they would sort of ditch me during recess and kind of run away. And I don't know how long it lasted, maybe a couple weeks or something. But if, all of a sudden I just didn't have any friends. Like, it was just like the leader of the group just decided, like, let's run away from Ben. And I think from that, I was like, oh, okay, that was awful. I don't want that to happen again. If people like me, they won't run away from me. And so I need people to like me. And I think maybe that's where this came from. And so I just cared a lot about what other people thought. And I think that's what contributed to my depression, was like, I was so wound up about like being perfect and, making, like, winning the championship for rugby, getting the academic scholarship, like being the cool guy, whatever, that it started to just like, those weren't things that I really wanted to do, but I put so much pressure on myself to do them. And because I was just looking for that validation from other people. And that's a hard thing to shake, that's something that, when that happens to you so young, I think that a lot of our patterns they're solidified in our early ages, and it could be a trauma, like some sort of trauma that creates these patterns that you really have to kind of work with therapist or, do the personal work to sort of reframe what those are. And so that's something I think that is a constant struggle for me, but I think I'm getting better at them because at doing that by being honest with myself. I mean, I keep talking about being true to yourself, but this is, I guess, the theme of this podcast, because I found that when I have the confidence to be myself, and I truly feel like I'm tapping into who I truly am, then I care less about what other people think. I just know that I'm the best version of myself, and I'll be as unstoppable as I'm going to be, And so that is a difficult place to get to, but it's the best place to try and get to, because I think then you're being the full expression of yourself. And I think then you live longer, you're happier, you attract the better people. I do, like, talking with all these people is really interesting, because I talk with them after the keynotes, and different people come up and talk to me, and they either like talk about maybe their son, daughter is struggling with depression, or maybe they want to share their list item, or they, but I can, before they even say anything, I can tell the people that I know what they're going to say. And they're going to say, this is how I live. And before they even say that, I know they're going to say that, because I can see it in their faces. I know what those type of people, the energy they put off, what they look like, how young they look, how vibrant they look, their smile, their aura. And so I can spot that person before they tell me, and I know exactly what they're going to say. And that's what they say. They say, I've been living this way my whole life. I've tried to live this way. This is exactly how I tried to live my life. And I say, I know, I can see it. Because when and this is how my parents are, like they're 75. They still inspire me because they act like teenagers. They travel around in a Westphalia bus. They play music around the world. They never made a whole bunch of money, but they lived this life that kept them youthful, and they embody that youthful energy, that youthful spirit that we pound down from listening to other people tell us, no, can't do that. And so that naivete, that youthful, spirit is so important to keep. And when when you're living that life, I think that you ultimately, you live longer. You live longer.
Yeah, when I think of the ripple effect, that was actually the title of our first podcast. I never thought about the ripple effect of how living this lifestyle of constantly pursuing the discomfort, constantly doing the things we want to do, how that truly can impact the ripple of the rest of your life from a health perspective. Because I do believe that when I meet certain people and you can feel it in them, like they are walking a different beat to their own drum than the majority of people, and it's because of that.
It's a different frequency.
Yes,
it's a vibrancy that you can feel, and you're like, how old are you? You're like, bro, you're 71, and you can just, and I don't, I think you can do all the different hacks and tricks and things, but I think that is the biggest piece of longevity is living for you and being that full expression of who you are.
Yeah. I think you know this, but you are very much doing that. You're a little bit older than me, not by many years, but you are for sure walking that like high vibrant energy and hitting the best strides of his life right now. It's just constantly growing, but you're having that ripple effect, Ben. It's very clear. Like when I see you out and about, I can feel it in you. You have a very high frequency, it's really an honor to have gotten to know you. Before I get to the final question, I had one listener cue that I wanted to ask real quick. This is from Jordan. What's left on the list that you're most excited to do? I think there's 9 items left on the original Buried Life list.
Yeah. So there's actually, I think it's even cut down less than that. The biggest thing is go to space. I've gotten pretty excited about going to space the last year with all the new companies that are coming out, sending people to space or sort of democratizing commercial space flight. I actually spoke on a panel at South by Southwest. I had no business being on the panel, but I was moderating a panel about the democratization of commercial space flight. And so there's this company, there's a number of different companies, but they're all really allowing non-billionaires to go to space. And so I would love to, experience the overview effect, which is the feeling that astronauts describe when they look at the Earth and they feel this perspective change, this united feeling with the Earth and with Mother Nature, and a lot of people talk about how this changes the way they interact with people and Earth. And so, talk about like trying to find those moments that shake you and give you the perspective. That feels like a better one than the trauma of, losing someone. And so I think that would be really, really amazing. So I think that will happen in 2024. I'm talking with a couple of different companies and figuring out how we do that. And so that would be a great thing to accomplish and help someone else go to space that dreams of going to space. So that's the goal.
I'm going to say this, and I can't wait to pull this clip when this happens, 2024, 2025. This is April 28th of 2022 as we speak. I feel like there's going to be a ripple effect because I just heard Amar talking about this on the Colin Samir podcast, that's like their big goal as well, as to go to space someday. And I could be wrong, but I feel like, and I know, yes, there was a ripple effect of Buried Life, and I feel like there's a way to see that get rippled into space and could be pushed in a lot of different ways. So I just want to say, if it happens and it's a Buried Life yesterday collab of them going to space, you heard it here, folks. I called it. So might happen. Final 5 for you, Ben. These are just one sentence answers. Question number 1, how can people learn to give themselves permission to follow their interests and their ideas?
I can do it in one sentence or one word.
One word or one sentence.
Follow feelings, not your head. Follow your gut, not your head.
That's great. Question number 2. If you could go back and tell yourself one piece of advice at any point in your life, what would it be and when?
At any point, People are not thinking about you as much as you think they are.
It's a fact. Question number 3. What's an area of your life you need to put more effort into?
Rest, quiet.
Me too. Question number 4. What's the first step anyone can take to reaching their inner potential?
Stop and write it down.
It's great. Question number 5. Somebody's listening to the last 52 minutes of this podcast. They wrap up listening to this podcast right now. What is one challenge you have for the listeners after they finish hearing this episode today?
Write your list. Pick the one thing on your list that you feel most excited about and share it with someone else and ask them to check in on you.
Find that accountability partner. That accountability partner. Ben, this has been incredible to catch up with you, man. Big fan. You truly represent, you're just you are a living example for people to follow as a permission to go do the thing they really want to do. It's been incredible to not only watch you as a kid, as I'm watching MTV, you guys, then fast forward, get to meet you, get to know you. Just a big fan of everything you represent, the energy you give out, all the messaging that you push through, all the stuff that I've seen on YouTube, just from past speaking engagements. And I'm really excited for this bucket list journal because I really think that when you do write something down, this is your accountability partner. You might be somebody listening and you don't feel like you have that group of people that really inspires you, that makes you want to do great things. Well, this could be the place to go and do, which I think is just so exciting for people. And what's really exciting for listeners, Ben has shared a discount code with me today that will get you free shipping direct to your door. So if you head over to bucketlistjournal.co, I'll have it linked up in the description below, as well with the discount code, which is LIVE22, all capital letters, LIVE 22. That'll be in the description of this episode. That'll get it to your doorstep free of shipping. And hopefully this will be your accountability partner to actually work towards the life that you want to live. If you have enjoyed today's episode, ladies and gentlemen, always the biggest thing is screenshot the episode, post it to your IG story, tag Ben. He's at Ben Nemtin, BenNemtin, and tag me at Bob A. That's BO, 3 B's, 4 A's, and a Y. Share the podcast in your IG story. Let us know, what was the biggest takeaway? How did this episode change your perspective? Maybe you want to be vulnerable enough to actually share out what that bucket list item is that you want to go towards. Post it to your story. All of your friends and followers are going to now know, so you're going to have to go work towards it. And then linked up below, I'll have Ben's website where you can check out some more of his content. Is there anywhere else I should be sending listeners after the episode, Ben?
No, that sounds great. I do want to say it's been super awesome to be able to see you evolve over the past couple of years, from the podcast that we did a couple of years ago to now, and just to see your trajectory. Super proud of you and excited for, I know this is just the beginning for you. So lots to come. So stay tuned, listeners.
Thank you, man. I mean that, like, genuinely means a lot, because you've had a ripple effect on me, and hopefully the path that I continue to go will have a ripple effect on those that are following and listening along the way. So I appreciate you, man.
Awesome, bro.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Bearded Man Podcast. See ya.